The trouble started around September of 1972. I was 11 years old, chubby, with shoulder-length blonde hair, blue eyes, and a face full of freckles. My grandma, my father's mother, had been in and out of hospitals since 1969 battling cancer. I loved my grandma very much and often prayed to God to heal and make her all better. God, you know my grandma because she believes in you and prays to you all the time. Why are you punishing her by making her sick? Please don't punish her anymore and heal and make her all better. I would say this each and every night before I went to bed. When my grandma was first told she had cancer in late 1969 and had the first of many surgeries, she made sure that my parents had my granddaddy, my father's father, over for dinner and made me promise to never let him get lonely. So for the next 3 years, my granddaddy would have dinner with us every night and would come over on the weekends. When he wasn't with us, he was visiting my grandma in the hospital. She had to go back in the hospital in late August of 1972 to have yet another surgery because the doctors found more cancer. My mother and my Aunt Bobby would go to the hospital and sit by my grandma's bed at night so that my granddaddy could go home and get some sleep. My granddaddy was always at the hospital when he wasn't with us. Sometimes, if my grandma had to have a lot of tests done, my granddaddy would go and get something to eat at the coffee shop by the hospital. Well, one day when my grandma was having some tests done, my mother had told my granddaddy to go and get something to eat and that she and my Aunt Bobby would come get him after the tests were done. They entered the coffee shop and were shocked and very upset, for they saw my granddaddy holding hands with a waitress who worked at the coffee shop. No wonder Jack likes coming here. He can get more than just food, my Aunt Bobby sarcastically remarked to my mother. Bobby, let's just go tell Jack that the tests are done and Joanne is back in her room, replied my mother. Well, I'm not talking to him, so you can go tell him and I'll wait outside, my Aunt Bobby said. My mother reluctantly approached my granddaddy. Excuse me, Jack, the tests are all done and Joanne has been taken back to her room. She's resting comfortably for now, but the doctor really needs to talk to you, my mother said. Okay, thanks. If you want, you and Bobby can go home and I'll call you after talking with the doctor, my granddaddy said. So my mother and Aunt Bobby left the hospital and came home. What the hell does he think he's doing? Going out on Joanne like that? I mean, she's lying in the hospital dying and he's out with another woman, I heard my Aunt Bobby holler out when she came in the house, stomping her feet and slamming the door. Now, Bobby, we don't know what he was doing. I think we should give him the benefit of the doubt, my mother said in her usual cheerful tone of voice. What did Granddaddy do that was so bad? And what do you mean he was out with another woman? I asked. Now, Matilda, this is grown-up talk, and you shouldn't be eavesdropping, Aunt Bobby said. My Aunt Bobby was a big woman with tight, curly black hair, always standing around with one hand on her hip, and with the other hand, she was always shaking her finger at you with a cigarette dangling from her mouth. I wasn't eavesdropping, Aunt Bobby. You were hollering loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, I said back. I didn't care for my Aunt Bobby because she was always talking about people behind their back. I don't know why my Uncle Johnny married her. She was always nagging at him about one thing or another. "Matilda, I'll make you some lunch, and then you can go into your room and play until dinner," my mother said to me. She made me a grilled ham and cheese sandwich, and I had potato chips and soda with it. I finished my lunch and went into my bedroom to play. I could faintly hear my mother and Aunt Bobby talking, but from the bedroom I couldn't hear them. I snuck down the hall so that I could hear better. "Now, Bobby, don't go getting your panties in an uproar because Jack was holding another woman's hand. We don't know who she is, but I think that we should wait and see if Jack tells us anything about her," I heard my mother say. I said to myself, "Oh my gosh, Granddaddy was holding another woman's hand and Grandma is lying in a hospital bed dying. Bad Granddaddy." I wanted to listen some more, but I could hear them coming and ran quickly back to my bedroom. My grandmother died a few months later on Thanksgiving. It was not a day for thanks, but I was thankful because I knew my grandma wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Granddaddy brought this woman over a couple of months later to my birthday party and introduced her to the family. So this was the woman my Aunt Bobby and mother were talking about. Shannon was 22 years old, a little on the chubby side, and had poofy blonde hair, which I found out later was a wig. Shannon was 33 years younger than my granddaddy. Can you believe the nerve of my father to bring that hussy over to my house? My father said very angrily to my mother. "You know that your father has been very lonely since your mother passed away, and Shannon is probably just a friend, nothing more," my mother said in a hushed voice. Well, it turns out Shannon was more than just a friend. She and my granddaddy got married that year on November 25th, 1 year and 3 days since my grandma's death. Needless to say, my family started treating my granddaddy differently. He became the black sheep of the family, so to speak. You know, the relative that does something the rest of the family doesn't approve of and never gets invited to the family gatherings, but is always talked about.